I keep meeting my birth mom, but she doesn't know it's me. She had me when she was just 14. That thought has always been hard to wrap my head around. I'm 24 now, and it feels surreal thinking about how young she was. A child herself, forced into a situation most adults struggle to handle. I was given up for adoption, which I understand now, but growing up, it was a complex knot of feelings I had to work through. My adoptive parents were always open with me about being adopted. They told me about her, my birth mom, throughout my childhood. They even gave me a letter she had written when she gave me up. A letter from a 14-year-old girl, telling me how sorry she was that she couldn't be my mommy, hoping I would live a happy life. It's still crazy to read it sometimes, knowing the person who wrote those words was just a kid. A scared, heartbroken kid who had to make an impossible choice. I never held any resentment toward her. In fact, I always wondered what kind of person she was. My parents moved when I was 11 for my dad's job, which made it nearly impossible to find her. I grew up knowing she was out there somewhere, but I didn't have any way to reach her. That part of my life always felt like an unfinished story, a missing chapter. Then, through a lot of digging and sheer luck, I found her. She works at a small restaurant, tucked away in a quiet town, and I've been going there regularly for the last 3 months. At first, I wasn't sure it was really her, but the more I looked, the more I knew. Her eyes, her smile, it was her, my birth mom, the woman who had given me life and then let me go. But here's the thing, she doesn't know it's me. Every time I walk in, my heart races. I don't even know why I'm nervous. It's not like she would recognize me. But the thought of sitting just a few feet from her, having casual conversations, knowing who she is while she has no clue, it's surreal. The first time I went there, I was just testing the waters. I wanted to see what kind of person she was. Did she seem happy? Did she have a good life? Was she okay? I guess I wanted to know if giving me up had worked out for her the way it had for me. So I sat at a table, ordered some food, and waited. When she came over, there was this instant jolt inside me. She greeted me with a warm smile, just like she probably does with all her customers, but to me, it was different. It was personal. "Do you need a refill, honey?" she asked, her voice so kind and gentle, it took everything in me not to break down right there. She had no idea. She didn't know she was talking to her son, the one she wrote that letter for all those years ago. I wanted to tell her right then and there, but I couldn't. Something stopped me. I guess I wasn't ready. I've been back almost every week since then, sometimes once, sometimes twice. I drive 2 hours just to see her, to hear her voice. And every time, I sit at the same table, order my usual, and we chat. Little things, how the food is, the weather, her asking if I want dessert. Every time I feel this pull inside me, this urge to just say it, to tell her who I am. But then, I don't. I just let the moment pass, leaving the restaurant with the same secret I came in with. She's so nice, though. Genuine, you know? Like, when it's not too busy, she'll talk a bit more, open up about her day. She even started recognizing me, saying things like, "Back again, huh?" with a big smile that lights up her whole face. It feels like she knows me, even though she doesn't know the whole truth. And yet, every time she says something like, "Do you want a refill, honey?" I feel this pang in my chest. I want to tell her so badly, but how? How do you drop something like that on someone? "Hey, I'm the kid you gave up for adoption 24 years ago. Surprise!" It feels impossible, and yet, the more I see her, the more I want to tell her. I've thought about leaving a letter for her, kind of like how she left that letter for me. It feels poetic, doesn't it? But I don't know. Writing it down seems like the easy way out. I feel like I owe her more than that. I want to say it. I want her to see me and hear me when I tell her who I am, but I don't know how to do it without completely freaking her out. What if she's not ready to know? What if she's moved on and doesn't want to reconnect? I spend a lot of time in my head about it, driving back and forth, playing out scenarios of how the conversation might go. But I always end up in the same place, stuck. Stuck between wanting to tell her everything and being terrified of how she'll react. So for now, I just keep going back. I keep meeting her week after week, and she keeps treating me like I'm just another customer. But I'm not. I'm her son. I can't keep doing this forever, though. Every time I walk into the restaurant, a part of me knows that the secret is wearing me down. It's like carrying this invisible weight on my shoulders that gets heavier with each visit. And the more we talk, the more I start to feel like I'm lying to her. Even though she doesn't know, it's as if I'm keeping something from someone who deserves to know the truth. That's the thing. She does deserve to know. This woman gave me life, and she's been kind to me every single time I've come to see her. And here I am, just sitting there, knowing something that would turn her world upside down, and I haven't had the courage to say a word. There was this one night when I almost did it. The restaurant was quiet, only a few people left, and she was winding down her shift. I had stayed longer than usual, hoping for a moment where it was just the two of us, a time where I could finally gather the nerve to tell her. She came over to clear my plate, smiled that warm smile, and asked, "Is there anything else I can get for you, sweetheart?" My heart was pounding. I could barely breathe. This was it. This was the moment. All I had to do was say it. But instead, I just shook my head and thanked her for the meal. My voice cracked a little, and she looked at me for a second, like she could sense something was off. But she didn't push it, just gave me another smile and walked away. That was the moment I realized I couldn't keep this up. I couldn't keep seeing her without telling her who I was. It wasn't fair to either of us. The longer I waited, the harder it would become, and I was already struggling. So I made a decision. The next time I went to the restaurant, I was going to tell her. I didn't care how terrified I was or how emotional it might get. I needed her to know. The plan was simple. I would wait until the restaurant was closing, when she wasn't busy, and we could talk in private. That way, if it got emotional, it wouldn't be in front of a crowd. But even as I drove there, my heart was racing. I kept rehearsing what I would say, but every time, the words felt too heavy. How do you even begin a conversation like that? When I pulled into the parking lot, the restaurant was just about to close. I could see her through the window, wiping down tables and chatting with a coworker. My stomach was in knots, but I knew I had to go through with it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I waited outside until she finished her shift. She spotted me when she came out and smiled, like she always did. "Hey, you're still here, what's up?" I swallowed hard, trying to calm my racing heart. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice shaking. "Something important." Her smile faded, and I could see the concern in her eyes. "Okay," she said softly, stepping closer. "What is it?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the letter she had written for me when I was a baby. The letter I had kept all these years. The one she had asked my adoptive parents to give me. I handed it to her, my hands trembling. She took the letter, her brows furrowed in confusion. But the moment she opened it, everything changed. Her face went pale, and she gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked at me, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh my God, is this—" I nodded, tears already streaming down my face. "It's me," I whispered. "I'm your son." What happened next felt like a blur. She started crying, this deep, heart-wrenching sob that came from somewhere deep inside her. It was like all the years of pain, regret, and hope had finally caught up to her all at once. I didn't even have to say much more. She just knew. She knew it was me. She wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a tight hug, but then quickly pulled back, her voice trembling. "Is it okay if I hug you?" she asked, almost like she couldn't believe this was real. "Of course," I managed to say through my own tears. We stood there, in the parking lot, hugging each other and crying like we were the only two people in the world. Her legs gave out for a second, and I had to hold her up. It was like all the strength had left her body, but she didn't let go. Neither did I. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, just holding on to each other, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Finally, she pulled back just enough to look at me, tears still streaming down her face. "Look how big you've gotten," she said, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. "You're so grown up." Her words made me break down all over again. Hearing her say that, hearing the love and pride in her voice after all these years, it was everything I didn't know I needed. We stood there, crying and laughing, a mess of emotions that neither of us could fully process. Then she insisted we go back into the restaurant. She wouldn't take no for an answer. "We need to talk," she said. "There's so much I want to know about you." So we went back inside, just the two of us. She unlocked the door and let us back in, turning on the lights. We sat in one of the booths, had coffee and a slice of pie, and talked for hours. We talked about everything, my childhood, my parents, her life since giving me up. It was emotional, heavy, but also beautiful. She told me how she used to imagine every kid she saw that was around my age could be me. Every time she saw a boy who looked like he could be my age, she'd wonder if it was me. And sometimes she would cry in public, overwhelmed by the possibility. It messed with her head, she said, made her depressed. So when I first started coming to the restaurant, she had that same feeling, but she pushed it way down, convincing herself it couldn't be me, but it was. We stayed in that restaurant for hours, talking until almost 2 a.m., even though the place had closed at 11. It didn't matter. Time seemed to melt away as we dove deeper into each other's lives, trying to make up for all the lost years. She asked me so many questions about my childhood, my parents, what I was like growing up. But her main concern, the question she kept coming back to was, "Are you happy?" She asked it more than once, as if she needed reassurance, as if knowing I had a good life was the only thing that would help heal the pain of giving me up. I told her the truth. I had an amazing childhood. My adoptive parents were everything I could have asked for. They loved me, supported me, and gave me a life full of happiness and stability. And I thanked her for giving me that chance, for making the hardest decision of her life to ensure that I would have a future full of love and opportunities. Hearing that seemed to bring her some comfort, but it also made her cry again. Her emotions were all over the place. Sometimes she would look at me with the biggest smile, and other times her face would crumple with sadness. She kept saying how much she regretted not being able to keep me, how she and my biological father had wanted to raise me, but knew they couldn't because they were just kids. She told me my biological father had a particularly hard time accepting it, which is why he didn't leave anything behind for me. He didn't want to face the reality that he might never see me again. That's when she told me something that completely took me by surprise. My biological parents had stayed in contact with each other all these years. Even though they had gone their separate ways and built their own lives, they had kept in touch, just in case I ever reached out to one of them. They had planned for this, hoping that if I ever came looking for one of them, they could get in contact with each other to make the process easier. I couldn't believe it. I had always thought I'd never meet my biological father because there was no information about him when I started my search. But here she was, telling me that they had both prepared for this day. The idea that they had thought about me for so long, even after all these years, filled me with this overwhelming sense of gratitude and emotion. As we talked, she also told me about the years after my adoption, how she had lived in the same city, hoping that I might come looking for her. After I turned 18, she waited, hoping I'd show up. But when I didn't, she started to worry that maybe I resented her. Maybe I hadn't been told I was adopted, or maybe I had simply decided that I didn't want her in my life. Hearing that broke my heart. She had spent years thinking that I might hate her, or that I didn't want anything to do with her. It made me feel guilty for not reaching out sooner. But when I apologized, she was quick to tell me that it wasn't my fault. that I had done the right thing by going at my own pace. She didn't hold any resentment, only love. She kept looking at me with so much warmth and care, like she was trying to soak in every moment. It was strange, surreal even, to feel that kind of connection with someone who had been a stranger to me my entire life. But at the same time, it felt natural, like we were always meant to find each other again. Toward the end of the night, she asked if we could have dinner soon, just the two of us, so we could keep talking and learning about each other. She even mentioned that when I was ready, she would love for me to come over to her house and meet her husband. It was a lot to take in, but the idea of staying connected to her felt right. It felt like the missing pieces of my life were finally starting to fall into place. Before we said our goodbyes, we exchanged phone numbers. I promised to keep in touch, and as I walked out of the restaurant that night, she sent me a text, thanking me for giving her a gift she thought she might never receive, the chance to know her son. When I got home, my girlfriend came over, and the moment she saw my face, she wrapped her arms around me. I broke down in her embrace, crying tears of relief, joy, and the overwhelming weight of everything that had happened. These weren't sad tears. They were happy, cathartic tears. Everything had gone better than I ever could have imagined. Sure, it had been heavy, emotional, and even a bit painful at times. But in the end, I was glad that we had finally opened up to each other. It's wild, how someone who has been a total stranger your whole life can look at you with so much love. It made me realize that family is more than just blood or shared memories. It's about the connections we choose to make, the relationships we decide to build, no matter how much time has passed. Looking back on everything now, I'm still processing it all. There's so much more to talk about, so many more stories to share, and I'm excited to see where this new chapter of my life will take me. I know there are challenges ahead, and it won't always be easy, but I'm grateful for the chance to finally know the woman who gave me life. She's no longer just a face in my imagination, or the writer of a letter I've read 1,000 times. She's real, she's here, and now she's a part of my life. And for that, I'm forever thankful.